we know that the most important aspect of our performance on this test is going to be our process. So what does a successful process on logical reasoning involve, as it evolves? How about that? Start from the very beginning. So let's proceed in as methodical a fashion as we can. So and literally sort of like step 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever. What's the sound process for logical reasoning? So the first thing is, ID the question. Really important. Why, though? Why is it important to read the question first? What does it matter? Whether it's asking me to strengthen it or weaken it or identify a flaw. I mean, what is the reason behind this? Based on what kind of question I'm trying to answer, my perspective when I read the argument changes, As Jake's saying, it informs my approach. So my approach is going to be subtly different based on the kind of question that I'm working. And so we classify questions a couple of different ways. One way is to think of the assumption family questions and then the others. So what I like to do is start with sort of the default process and then learn what the exceptions to that default process are. And the default process involves what we call the assumption family questions if you have our strategy guide. So step 2 then would be ID the core of the argument if it's assumption family question, or if necessary, I should say. If necessary is deemed by identifying the question stem from step 1. The next step, the core being the conclusion and the evidence there involved would be, as someone pointed out, consider the gap or any logical gaps or common flaws, common gaps, patterns. The LSAT is a standardized test, and it's really just a series of patterns that are repeated over and 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 over again. So while I understand certainly that there are problems out there that pose difficulties in the way they're worded or the way the choices are worded, those particular specific problems that really pose challenges to identifying information or interpreting information are very, very few. And what tends to happen when people prepare for the test is they tend to overemphasize. So this is a very blanket general statement. People tend to overemphasize those rare and extremely difficult problems to the detriment of improving their ability to quickly and efficiently answer all the other problems on the test. So, I don't know. I haven't really looked over the problems that you guys sent in advance. I have been booked lately, though I think we're going to have a great discussion. I don't know if those are these problems or not. So I'm not necessarily talking about the problems you guys sent in. Sometimes people send in the most difficult problems that they've found, and I understand the value in having that explained to you, and yet in terms of your overall improvement in your LSAT score, chances are, unless you're at like a 172 and hoping to get a 175 or 169 and you need to break 170, that one incredibly difficult problem is not the kind of problem that's keeping your score lower than you want it to be. So I advise you just to keep that in general perspective, that it's the middle ground, typically, where there's the most room to be made, and in what the easy problems present to you. So, making what you consider to be an easy problem a bigger and bigger and bigger category is really important, and people tend to really underemphasize the value of increasing their performance on easy questions. And increasing performance on easy questions has a number of positive results. You see patterns more clearly, you see the simpler patterns, the more basic patterns in the way arguments are presented and in the way answer choices are phrased, written, and presented. And those patterns are applicable to the more difficult problems later on down the road. So while you learn to improve your speed, let's say you could learn to do the first 10 problems of the logical reasoning section in 5 minutes. 30 seconds a problem is possible on the first 10 when you really understand the patterns that are being presented. And then that's a double reward, because then you've got extra time and energy to focus on the more difficult problems, and you have that built-in awareness of what the typical patterns are, so that you recognize typical patterns in more difficult material, and you recognize deviations from typical patterns. So see, finding the patterns as a home base is extremely important, not just for when you can see them, but for when there's a lack of a pattern. Well, that's information that's useful and that's important to see as well. So back to this process. And feel free to chime in with questions, guys, in the chat window, or raise your hand if you want to jump on the mic at any time. The last thing that we're going to do is get to the answer choices, process of elimination here. And this is a really important aspect of our process as well. It's not really simply just learning to eliminate. I think there's more to it.